Hey, this is Tyler.
And I'm KC.
And you're listening to
the Element Podcast.
What's happening, all my woods people? We're coming to you from Kansas. We're hanging out in deer camp right now on the couch, getting ready to leave because I don't know if we have a whole lot more to do here, KC.
Yeah, we could shoot some does maybe, but outside of that, Tyler, I guess we're letting cats out of bags right now.
Yeah.
We bagged a few cats.
A
couple dogs, actually.
Cat daddies.
Tyler's killed 5 bucks this year. I have killed 3 as of yesterday. But we're not going to talk about him yet.
No. See, here's the thing, y'all, is we've been hunting so much. Mm-hmm. We hadn't been able to, between running the Wired to Hunt stuff and our YouTube channel, the podcast stuff, we've been trying to get these stories to you. Also, Q&As have been coming out like crazy. We wanted to make sure and supply you guys with the ammunition you needed for the rut. And you asked for certain ammunitions by asking and submitting questions. And we answered them. And
I have an impromptu idea.
Yeah.
Should we solicit yet again for Southern Rut questions?
Whoa.
And say we put out a podcast the first week of December that's all about the Southern Rut. Ruts in the South. You want to do that?
Rutherns. Yep.
Y'all send us questions on Instagram. If you hunt in the South or think about hunting in the South, which you should.
Which, and generic rut questions can work then too, So if it's not like, if you're not like, oh, what do I do in a pine plantation or whatever, right? It's all right if you just like, well, should I rattle, at this stage or this whatever,
Yeah, and if you got, we have hunted up north some, but not really late season. But, if you got something you want to ask us, you want to ask us some late season questions or whatever, you can do that too. Mm-hmm. But those Q&As are fun and they're good, and I think that it seems that everyone has benefited by them.
Yeah, we've received some messages from some people, including our good buddy Nick, who killed a wall hanger recently on some public land. And there was a lot of I appreciate this and don't feel super like a super big part of it, but apparently people feel like our Q&As have helped them kill some bucks recently, which is pretty cool. That's what I aim to do.
Shoot, man,
right?
It's good questions as much as it is good answers.
Yeah.
Like we have some experience, but like the thought-provoking questions are really what makes those Q&As good, is that people ask stuff that we might think of as either second nature or not even consider and have to sit there and ponder it for a while, and we're all kind of thinking about what we would do in that situation together. Mm-hmm. The meme of you've probably seen, like, Tyler likes it. It's like a person standing next to a mural of some people laughing, and they're laughing too, and it's like me hanging out with my favorite podcasters on the podcast, and that's actually what we're all doing. Y'all are listening to us. You don't get to say a whole lot because, you're in Kentucky right now, but we are all thinking about this stuff
Apparently
together.
they're in Illinois.
They are in Illinois.
There's a lot of Illinois listeners, man.
It's
crazy. I bet they're making fun of us for sure.
Probably so.
That's a good idea. And I think that because of those Q&As, we've been unable to kind of fulfill what we like to do on the podcast, which is tell the stories of some of these hunts, which is a way for us also to give out information
Call those stunts
about like what worked on those deer, right? What worked for the deer that we have shot.
I was looking for my water cup while ago. Could not find it. Thank you, Michael. He brought it to me. He's a nice dude. I put it on top of the refrigerator when I went outside a while ago.
He's got more nicknames than anybody in this world, man.
Yeah.
What's his newest one?
I don't remember.
What was it, Michael? Mike. Yeah, because we were putting one of these little fluffy things that diverts the wind from blowing out a mic on a GoPro, and it's like a little fluffy thing. And we're talking about how you got to put this sticker around the mic hole, the microphone hole. Right, and Casey thought it was hilarious because he thought I said Michael.
Michael, yep.
So now it's Michael.
That's him.
It's Spike, Michael.
I don't understand how he has so many nicknames.
Yep.
And it all started with Tony Peterson, I think.
It did.
Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, that's speaking of Mike Hole, thanks, man. He was on a hunt with you recently, and he's being a good team member and helping to pick up a bunch of stuff as we're getting ready to leave camp here. But so he's not on the podcast. But you guys had a pretty awesome hunt.
We did.
we had spent some time in South Dakota
PAH
in late September and early October, and we had some buck encounters. I shot a buck. You probably, I don't know if they've probably, yeah, there's been a little bit of footage that's released on the Element channel from that trip. The buck that I shot, I think, is going to be a meat eater video, so that'll be on the meat eater YouTube channel.
26th or the 28th.
Something like that, like late this month. So if you're not subscribed there, make sure you are. You want to be one of the 1.3 million that are subbed there, I imagine. Anyway, that's going to release then, I think. We actually are supposed to talk with our friend about that today. But there wasn't any more South Dakota videos, I don't think, made from that trip. So you guys decided to go back later in the month, and it was the cold front.
I didn't kill a deer in that trip. That's why.
Yeah.
You know, so I still had a tag.
I didn't want to sound like a jerk by saying that, so I was.
You're not a jerk by stating the facts that I can't kill one.
No, it wasn't that you couldn't kill one, but that you wanted to shoot a big one.
Yeah. Well, you know, on that first trip, I passed an opportunity that I probably could have killed on, but it was like it was still legal light, but it was questionable on if
your pins are looking pretty fuzzy at the time.
It would be a bad decision to take the shot, so I didn't. Yeah.
Well, you know, you got to make those decisions sometimes because you know, legalities are set by people who don't have the same ethics as you do.
Oh,
KC.
Ethics! Wow.
So, but anyway, you decided to go back and you based that trip around a cold front that some would call a perfectly timed cold front. I have said several times, and you agree, I think, that it was a great cold front, but that it wasn't perfect.
You could look at this from a bunch of different directions. Any cold front from about October 25th through the end of the year is pretty perfectly timed because cold fronts are good. And I think that's where people are coming at that from.
Yeah.
It's like, it's great. I'm glad it's here. It's a great time of year to have a cold front. But the perfectly timed cold front's probably on November 3rd, you know, like, and then you have like the 3rd through the 7th that just stay really cold, like bring it on.
Yeah.
Which we have not had.
No, we haven't. But I feel like when you first got there, when I was talking to you, you were pretty, you know, obviously not thinking it was the perfect cold front or whatever, but like thinking that this is awesome.
It was.
And you're like, oh, this is the time. And then by the end of the trip, I had a kind of a different vibe from you.
Really?
That it was like not the same amount of stoke that you had, and that the deer weren't quite doing what you thought they were the first day.
I had this impression because we're going to Canada that the rut would be a little earlier. That's still not the case. But daylight movement was up, and it's still awesome. It's not like the cold front made the rut happen.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of that going on, I think, initially. But we saw deer every day. We didn't have bad sits the whole trip, you know. So
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like maybe y'all were seeing like quite a bit of scraping action, and that was when you were seeing that early on, you thought, oh, the rut's kicking, but it was still like that late October, what they call scrape week, I guess.
Yeah,
now, or
that's
whatever.
exactly what it was, and it was good.
So a good time to kill a deer, just kind of hard. The deer aren't in just straight up let you get away with anything, rattle at them, and get them to come to you.
Exactly right. And they don't move a ton.
Yeah.
Like mid-November, you got deer that are going miles every day. And at that time of year, those deer are just kind of making their tight little loops and still just patrolling their area because they've already found does, and they just hang out there until those does come in, and then different things happen. So what was going on then is that we were seeing deer, but it was still, even though it was super cold, it was kind of on the shoulders of morning and evening, you know, like you'd have daylight movement, but it wasn't cruise time yet. You know what I mean? Like for sure, well, the first day we showed up, we got there pretty late, and I had the intention of going in really far into a place the next day. That was like when we went up there, but it was so far. I mean, it's almost too far to make in one day. It is terrible. It is a terrible drive. I mean,
I felt bad for you, man.
Well, that's all right.
Because I don't know, trips like that kind of stress me out, where it's like, you know, when you're talking about like over 12 hours, in a day of driving, it gets a little bit like I am going to Canada. You know what I mean? Like,
dude, we were pushing the 20-hour mark. You know, like it's you for sure are about to see some maple leaves. You know, like it is like that. And so you get real tired, real fatigued. You show up late to your motel, and you don't have what it takes to organize for the hunt the next day. So that's what we did. We showed up really late. We had a great trip. Michael's tough to deal with on the road, but I just listened to a bunch of podcasts, so I didn't have to talk to him.
Yeah,
you know?
Put your headphones in.
That's right. Actually, that's all a joke. It was World Series time, you know, and we were watching the Rangers just whoop the snot out of the Diamondbacks every day. So that was fun.
And Meisel's a funny guy, man.
He is pretty funny.
Did Meisel come from that trip, or was that more recent?
Meisel was in Kansas last time we were
here. Okay.
What came from Neifel in there?
Neifel. Like it's one of those fatigued sayings.
Yeah.
Comes out.
I do this thing where
like taco milk.
I say really silly things whenever I'm tired, like because I talk fast, and I talk faster than my brain can process the words sometimes, and that's what goes on. So we got up there really late, made the decision to hunt a different property the first day. That's not as hard to get into, not near as – so I personally don't like to do any camping if it's below freezing, if I can avoid it. It's just a good way to have a terrible morning, not have all your stuff ready, your fingers are cold, yada, yada. So we moteled it, right? But that puts you to where you're going to drive some in the morning. I'd rather have 5 hours of good sleep than 6.5 of cold kind of dookie sleep. You know what I mean? So that was kind of our thing. And at this time of year, too, the days are a lot shorter, so you get pretty good sleep even if you have to drive quite a bit. Now, earlier in the month, it was terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't get back to the house, eat, and go to bed in time to get 6 hours of sleep. It's bad. So
early season's rough, man.
It is, man. We hunt at a place that's a little easier access that morning. We get in a little bit late still because we're organizing and doing all this stuff. I probably bag-stared, or Michael and I tend to just joke around and not get into places early, but it's all right. It let us kind of find the right tree, and we were in it, and we were almost hung in time. What's he looking at?
Dude, his legs are so pale.
Yeah, dude. They are.
I just noticed that. Sorry, Michael.
Dude, if you're from,
that's why his upper body looks good.
Does it? He got the nose tan from yesterday.
Yeah, he did.
Sorry. He was attaching the camera arm to the tree, and we had a spot go underneath us. Yeah, I know. He was slobbering.
It's funny. I watched his video yesterday, and in every interview he says, well, me and KC got in here a little late.
But it's what he thinks is late. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've convinced him. He realizes, like, there's no reason to be in the tree an hour early, man.
Yeah.
You just sit there and smelling stuff up.
You can just freehand the spike that comes in while you're setting up.
That's right. No, it was just super thick in there. It took us 20 minutes to get back into that spot, and it's only 500 yards from the truck. You're picking your way through, trying to be quiet, and I don't know. We would just end up going a little deeper than I expected us to find the right tree, but it was good. But we saw deer moving bed to food still, and bucks that were not doing the cruise thing, but they were with those, and they were checking scrapes on the way back to bed. And Michael also has a tag on this trip, so we're bringing 2 bows on a lot of this stuff, and his standards are a little different than mine, and that's a good thing because shooting deer is fun, right? And Michael likes to have fun. He's going to shoot a 2-year-old if he has the opportunity. I'm thinking, hey, I just drove 17 hours up here, and I'm kind of just have this responsibility to kind of make this trip worth it. So I'm going to hold out for a little bigger deer, which actually is really good because we can go to every hunt with optimism that good chance we kill a deer. And we see a Michael shooter like right off the bat, 300 yards away, checking the scrape, and he's working the direction that we are, the same direction that deer just came. So we're like, oh, it is on. Let us go. Michael gets his bow. We do the camera swap. I become cameraman. And then that deer just disappears into the bedding, and we never see him again that day. It was kind of a weird thing. It's a thing we were noticing happening, especially in that little area, is that those bucks would eat. They would check a scrape on the way back to bed sometimes, and then they were getting to their bedding.
Yeah.
They weren't.
Even though it was cold.
Around. Yeah, it was cold. But I think it was like the 27th that day. That sounds about right. Or maybe 28th. It's 28th that day, I think. And you know, I kind of thought that we'd see a little bit more ruddy action, but I think at that point in the year, it's all about the smell in the air. If there's a doe that kind of is a little bit early, things can get going pretty quick, but those bucks aren't. A 1.5 might try to force it a little bit, but those 2-year-olds, they've been through it 1 year. They kind of know. You know, they're like, And these are, I know it's all relative, right? But these are like big deer at 2. Like 8 points with swole necks, you know.
Yeah, they also got that square body kind of look just because they eat so much. It's
fat.
weird. Like, it's weird because in the summer in Texas, deer, like they have some stuff to eat till about July, and then it's like, yeah, they got stuff to eat, but it's not the same. Like if you go to South Dakota in the summertime in August, like yards have like what Bermuda grass or whatever it is. It's just like just green as it gets, and our yards are all brown and toasted. And I just feel like that the summertime food leading up to that October freeze is like good on that landscape.
Oh yeah,
there.
well we
they
talked
get
about
decent
that
rain.
with Matt and Adam at Land and Legacy quite a few times. You know, most places the limiting factor or the limiting season for food availability is late winter, which where we live it's actually late summer. Because that's whenever there's nothing on the landscape because it's all brown, dead, or eaten. And so, yeah, up there you don't have that. Those deer are just putting it on. And I have an interesting tidbit about that at the end of this story, right? But so those deer are fatties, and we're trying to kill one bad. So that, and this is all corresponding to the cold front, right? Very, very cold that morning, no precipitation yet. But midday that day, the snow blows in, and it's getting it. I mean, actually, while we were in the tree, the snow blew in. We had some really cool, like, I mean, we're from Texas, right? You get a snowflake on film, it's like getting a booner on trail camera.
Yeah,
you know
dude.
what I'm saying? Like, it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
And
slow motion.
Yeah,
Golly,
dude. 120 snowflakes, let's go.
Doesn't get better, dude. Come on now.
So,
man, y'all ain't never seen that.
The snow goes to coming in, and we're like, okay, these deer are going to be on the food tonight. Let's go hit a food source. I'd found this little state planted food plot of turnips that was pretty. It's where I ended my last hunt, and I almost got a shot at a really nice buck there. And I was like, let's go there. Well, we show up over there and hunt, and it's kind of lackluster hunt. And this is a thing. Y'all might have some takes on this, and if you know more about the turnip stuff, tell us about it on social. But all the tops were kind of frostbit, and they kind of were mushy, you know. And but there's a lot of turnips underneath, but the deer just didn't really hit them. We had a couple spikes kind of run by, but they were not run by, but like kind of cruise through. I think they were kind of doing the scrape thing more than they were eating the turnips, but those turnips just were not the spot.
They say that the roots of the turnip will get like sugars that go into them whenever. Yeah. Right? I wonder if it's like not quite happened. Once the frost, it takes like a few days or a week.
I saw a thing on an infograph the other day though that said that was kind of a misconception that as soon as the roots develop, they have the sugars. But I don't know either way. I'm sure that people have different thoughts on it. But either way, they weren't hitting them like they were. I mean, that was the thing in early October, and we hardly can even get a brassica to grow where we live, So it's hard. I don't know too much about them, about how to hunt them and this, that, and the other. But that was not the move. They all got snowed on while we were there. It was a cold, snowy night, and we didn't see much of anything, which made me sad. But what was nice is that the road was frozen, so you could like drive out of there. If it was wet and muddy, it might be kind of tough. So that was good. And then the next day, we went back and got some good sleep, watched the Rangers win like Game 3. It was awesome. And we were eating Nilgai taco meat the whole time we were there, just hammered down, dude. And we were just eating good, living good, sleeping good, And got up early the next morning and headed out to our long trek. And we're doing a bunch of hunt math of like, we have to get up at this time, it takes this long to get ready, we have to go this far, we have to get gas in the morning, yada, 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 and then it takes this long once you get to the property to drive to the place you're going to park, and then you have to walk in, and then you have to maybe hang a set. All this, we do all this math, and we still are 30 minutes behind once we get back there. And this is like me trying and hitting my, goals of time. But we had like a hiccup with something. I can't remember what it was. Like might have forgot something and had to go back to the truck. I don't know. But there was like a thing where we lost 15 or 20 minutes in that morning. And you almost have to account for that. It's kind of like if it takes 8 hours to get somewhere in the truck, you can hit that pretty close. But if it takes 10 hours, you're looking at like 11 or 11 and a half. You know, like there's this hill that you can't really get over of like you got to stop and eat at least once or twice, and you got to get two stops of gas instead of one, and in that it's going to take longer. You're going to have to talk to somebody in the gas station, you know, whatever. So that's kind of how this place was. It was like a big drive for us, and so it's just so far that it's hard to time it all out correctly. We get back, and we pretty much are there for glassing time more than we are like actual hunt. And this has been a little while, so I'm sorry if I'm a little bit fuzzy on my details, but we were going to go in and try to hang in a tree anyways. And Michael, did we end up hanging in a tree that morning? No, we ended up walking around and doing the still hunt type thing because we actually just looked at footage of this deer a while ago. I thought he was like kind of like a schmedium. He's pretty nice. I probably would have shot him. So we bumped that deer kind of right at first shooting light, crossing the creek. That made me sad. And then we kind of did a setup. We did some rattling, no answers. And we're going to like work our way around this hill kind of in the shady side so we can't be seen and do some glassing and looking around. And we are doing that. Michael has pretty good eyes. And Michael, while I'm looking afar, spots a forky at like 200 yards. Hey, you know, I think he did the click thing. So I like to do clicks. You know, that's my way to get people's attention if they're pretty close because it's a pretty natural sound. And I think he did that and pointed. There's a forky at like 150, something like that. It's just on the other side of this creek. And we were watching it, and it's just hanging out. It ain't doing much. Like, he's about to bed over here. And then I can see, like, tines behind the brush over here. Like, oh, look at that. And kind of start getting excited, glassing it up. There's a really nice 8-point, big-bodied deer. I think he was kind of one of those deer that is on the lower end of the genetics when it comes to antlers. I think he was probably four-year-old at least. But he only had, like, a 120-inch 8-point frame, you know, not super big, but a deer I'm shooting for sure, absolute shooter, you know. And so I'm thinking 100 things, right? It ranges from what should I do right now to how does this affect what I do 3 days from now, you know. And I think a lot of us deer hunters deal with that when you see a buck and it's new information and you have to process all that. And I'm watching. And I'm thinking, okay, I need to see if this deer's going to bed here, if they're checking scrapes, or why these two bucks are right there. Is there a doe over there I don't see? And what ends up transpiring is that those bucks are just in there. It's a very scrapey area. It's kind of like the opposite of a stage. It's like bedding staging, pretty much. So, like, they went in there and hung out, scraped around, and then they're going to go bed somewhere else later. While we're watching them, I see a ginormous buck and another small buck come from far, far off. They check a scrape on a landmark tree that if you were sitting in, you would have shot a giant buck, a big 10-point. And they come and meet up with these. Well, the two big deer square off and do the puff-up thing, and the 8-point is more dominant. He kind of submitted the other. They didn't fight, but the big 10-point submits to him. That big 10-point might have been a 3-year-old, or he's no older than 4, but he had a lot of mass. He's really big. Like, if I saw them both standing there, I'd shoot the 10, even though he's younger. So I'm like, well, this is interesting. And there's no way for me to like cut these deer off. We watch them kind of like get all weird and fun and frolicky, and they just like run up over the hill and go through. Just deer in the plains do different stuff than deer in the cover, right? These deer just ran across the open, not fast, just kind of working their way across for like 300 yards. And like in East Texas, ain't a chance. those deer aren't doing that. They are going to be in the thick. They're going to walk the creek bottom before they do, in the water. And so we have a real good idea of where they went. And we're like, well, that's cool. So we can go cut those deer off in the evening. And our plan was to do exactly that. We went up on the hill to Glass for the midday, eat our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I think I had some chicken strips, which were a good move, that I'd got from a fast food joint or something. They were tasty. And we just kind of hung out midday, laid in the sun, got warm. It's kind of nice, actually, because it was very cold that day. I mean, it was like, I don't think it ever got above 28, but you could get kind of out of the wind in the sun and lay there and just bask like a big old walrus, Mm-hmm. It was pretty nice. Mm-hmm. And then the days are short, so you only do that for like an hour, hour and a half. You got some phone service. It's a nice time to kind of just chill and look around Glass. We glassed our way back. We moved kind of like midday and glassed the area we were going to go down into, and we saw that Forky. No, there's another deer. I don't know where he came from, but we saw him, and he was with a doe, kind of bumping her around a little bit. I was like, well, that's good to see. And then we went to go ahead and move down into the bottom. We weren't going to spook those deer, and we bump a mature buck off the side of the hill in this bedding stuff. That was sad. And it's just like there's so many deer that you just can't not bump deer, and that's been a problem up in this area. Mm-hmm. It's like there's too many deer that you just – I don't want to, but it's hard to figure out a way not to bump deer, and the only way to do it is to, like, just be in there really, really, really early, I guess. And you're still probably going to bump deer. You just don't see them because it's dark. But we go set up on this place where the deer were going to hopefully go – instead of, food to bed, back bed to food. And even though it was super cold, we did not see a whole lot. The wind got kind of weird where we were sitting. We kind of had this weird dynamic with the hills where it's kind of swirly. But I don't think that affected things too much. We did get smelled by a couple does that tried to come through. And they smelled us in a spot that I didn't expect them to. So that's when you know it's like my wind's doing some weird stuff. Mm-hmm. But right at last light, we had 2 does and a buck do exactly what they were supposed to do. There's the scrape of all scrapes is like 50 yards. There's a couple scrapes underneath us and a couple rubs right in here. And that buck was going to work towards us, and he just did not get there in time for shooting light. And then those does that were right in front of him ended up smelling us right at the end of shooting light, and they ran off. Ends up this buck's pretty recognizable. He's big. It's very late, but I'm glassing him through snow, and he's got a big throat patch. I see he's got a big frame, and that's about all I could tell from him. So I knew he's mature, like as soon as I saw him. And I could hear his antlers up in that tree, whenever he's scraping around. That's a cool sound. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a very hype sound. Mm-hmm. The snow is weird, too, because it kind of like muffles distant sound, but you can still hear really good close. Mm-hmm. So it's very quiet, and it's very crisp sound. So we got out of there that night. And, again, we decided that we needed to – we'd bumped some deer, so we're going to let that place rest for a day. We were going to go back and chase some deer around with Michael. Michael was on – we made the move that morning. We were set up right over this scrape. This is next morning, right? We set up right up over this scrape where the big buck from 2 days ago had checked that scrape. We get in the tree. Everything's good. We have a spike and a yearling underneath us, like spitting distance. It's awesome morning. And then we see – 2 shooter bucks, two 2-year-olds, big 8 points, pop out from the food source, and they're working down this tree line right to us. And they got a big old bunch of bedding grass here on the deer's right, our left, right? So either side, so they have a tree line and it's tall grass, and they're just walking down this transition line. Like, oh, they're going to come right to the scrape. It's about to go down. Wow. I'm like, maybe I should shoot one of these. I don't know, Mm-hmm. And then they just do not check the scrape. They do not come over there. They stay 85 yards from us, and they have no clue we're in the world. The wind is perfect for us, and they just hook right into their bedding. They do like a little J-hook thing that you hear about. Makes you mad because I don't like to believe in such nonsense, but it's a thing some places for sure. Mm-hmm. They just came – hooked down to the downwind side of where they were going to bed, and they followed a trail right through the tall grass into this island of trees out there, and no shots. And it was painful to watch. Mm-hmm. But then finally we went and set up on them that evening. Long story short, deer comes by at last light at 50. Michael grunts at him and no go. He comes to us, but then runs off. So fun times.
Yep.
Back to the
drawing board.
Yeah, back to the deep place we go the next day.
Yeah.
And we have some ideas, some thoughts about what we need to do because we were in there 2 days before that. And it's pushing ever closer to the rut, so we're thinking, oh, it's getting rutty. Mm-hmm. We go and set up, and we picked out a tree and everything. We set up in that staging area in the baddest killing spot you've ever seen, dude. I mean, I will set up in that tree again. There's scrapes around. All trails go by this tree at 30 yards, or less, and it is bad at the bone. And no deer do the thing that morning that they did the morning before. However, Michael's like, hey, don't forget. At probably 5 minutes before sunrise.
Hey, I'm going to make me a lunch too, just so you know.
It's a real frosty day. Like, real cold, real frosty. I think it's 17 that morning. And, it's damp from the snow, so there's just a bunch of frost. And it's just picturesque. The wind's not blowing too bad, so we're staying pretty warm. And we see a mondo. At first, saw him in my eyes. At first, I was like, oh, it's a nice deer. And then you put your glass on him, like, oh, he's getting bigger. And then he turns his head, and you're like, okay, he's pretty big.
We got to go now.
Yeah, we're in the tree. So he's across the creek. He's working our way. I know where there's a creek crossing, like a major creek crossing that he's headed towards. I'm like, oh, he's going to go right there, and he's going to come over here, check these scrapes, we're going to shoot him, and we're just going to have a party. And he's like checking 2 or 3 scrapes over there, and then all of a sudden this deer just disappears. We don't know where he went. I was trying to get my bow. Like, it was bow grabbing time at this point in time. He's like 95 yards away. And I grab my bow. I look back, and I can't find the deer. I asked Michael, hey, where'd he go? He's like, I don't know. He just, like, kind of disappeared. And I was like, man, maybe he bedded right there. It's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's, like, not even sunrise yet. And then it never crossed my mind again. Long story short, he bedded right there at, like, 7:45 or whatever time.
Y'all got it on video, too, right?
I don't know. Did we get –
You texted me that apparently y'all, like, looked away for a second, but the camera has him bedding on video.
Maybe. I can't really remember. Probably so.
But y'all didn't know that till after something else happened.
Because at 11, we hadn't seen any deer, and I decided to rattle, and that deer gets up from his bed right there. I'm like, oh, my gosh. And but it was weird because he didn't really react to the rattling that much except for him standing up, and he just checked scrapes and worked his way out of our lives the other direction. So he wasn't too much into the fight, and that was a theme the week. The rattling just was not working at all. I was very surprised. No, even the big bucks were not into fights. They didn't want no snort wheezes. They didn't want no rattles, nothing. So we break our stuff down, head up to the hill, do the same thing midday. We see a buck cruising midday. He's not on a place that we can really get to, but it's kind of like a little hope as to, hey, it's kind of turning on right now. And this is Halloween, right? Like it's the day that a lot of Midwesterners like, all right, starts this day. So we talk. We're like, hey, let's go get the first midday that we did this, there was a whole, like, stalk that we went on that I didn't even talk about. We don't have time. But we were stalking a giant 8-point with some does, and a coyote messed the whole thing up. They were stalking the deer, too. Anyways, back to the 31st. We were like, hey, we need to get in there early. So we dropped down to the side of the hill. We're glassing where we're going to go set up that evening. We kind of have a plan of what we're going to do. And sure enough, we see some does kind of doing a weird thing early in the day. And then the big buck from that morning is behind them like 200 yards. He's like not bumping them, but he probably got them up out of their bed, and he's just kind of following their scent around. And we watch him, we glass him, and he's just going down this creek and crosses the creek, and we kind of see him disappear into this big habitat pocket that's like a half-mile away. And I'm like, all right, I'm tired of messing around with these guys. We're going to chase them. So we drop down off the hill into this creek bottom and make a big 1-mile loop. We get down in the creek and walk way, way around to get the wind right because there's a wind change that day. So we got the wind right for us. We come in from the backside on them. We're being super sneaky, like walking on ice and doing all kinds of wild things, walking through the water, being real quiet. And we come up over the the creek bank, and there's another secondary bank up there a little higher. We like sneak up there. We want to drop our packs right there, and as I'm like dropping my pack, we hear, whew, and apparently our sneaking was too good. We got too close to the deer. I thought we were going to be.
So you are doing some Mohican sneaking.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Blackfeet sneaking up there, I think, in that part of the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Just in time for Black Friday.
That's right.
Oh, wait, that's a month earlier.
Yeah. By the way, Ellen Podcast brought to you by First Light Gear. Black Friday sales coming up.
Oh, hey, cat's out the bag. Hey, everything cat's out the bag on this.
That's
dude.
right. Cats are out of the bag. I thought we were going to be further ahead of these deer than we were, and we weren't. We bumped them, but they didn't smell us, and this is a thing I'm noticing about deer. If they don't smell you, you got a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Chill out, drop down, don't make it any worse than it is. But a lot of times they'll run away because they don't know what happened. They're just cautious deer. It might have been a raccoon or something, So they run out to about 120, and that buck is still looking. The does are pretty chill, but he's still looking. So I snort wheezed at him a few times, and he was, he did the long neck thing, kind of looking, and then the second time I did it, he just went to bumping the does around. It kind of like got him like in the mood. And so the does were all over the place, and somehow we did this thing. We dropped our packs, we snuck around, and we were in the mix like 100 yards from the deer a lot, and then they worked the other way, but not really because of something we did. That's just the direction they were wanting to go. And we kind of did this weird deal where we were accepted by the deer. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe y'all have experienced this before, but there's like, you see deer and coyotes out in the field sometimes together, and like sometimes the deer are like real concerned with that coyote, and sometimes they're not. I think that they just did that thing with us. They're like, not really worried about that right now. And so anytime that we were like 150 yards from deer, we could get away with way more than we should have been able to. Now, I didn't do it with the buck. I made sure he had no idea we were there. But there were times when like a doe would look at us and we were not moving at her. We're just kind of moving horizontally. I just moved from pocket to pocket, and she wouldn't care. But I didn't do that haphazardly. I was noticing that they weren't too worried about us, and I was like, we could probably get away with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just continued to do that. We kind of just shadowed that buck for like 2 hours, and then we lost him for a while. We couldn't ever get closer, but I was like, man, if we just do this, it's going to work out. It's early, right? Like it's 3 hours before sunset right now. And we go up on this little knob that's down in the creek bottom because we can't find him. We're like, well, let's just get up here. Maybe we'll see some deer. We'll make another – because I kind of thought we'd lost him. And then, like, we did that for 30 minutes, watched a big 8-point come down the hill, and we're kind of getting hype about him. And he comes down and starts bumping the does around. Well, then, of course, the big buck. It's like, you know what? I don't really like him doing that. So he comes out and starts scraping around on some trees and stuff. And he's like at 180. And we're like, oh, there he is right there. And we think that he's going to go mess with these does. He kind of walks over there. The 8-point kind of goes past him. He's kind of like, oh, you know what? Maybe not. Maybe I'm not into those does, and just kind of walks up the trail. And then the big buck kind of just follows that buck up. It's kind of side hill type trail or whatever. And he's like rubbing on trees, scraping, just doing big buck things, and we're like freaking out a little bit. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to make a move on this deer. We're going to get super aggressive. We're going to kill this thing. And so Michael and I just use the lay of the land, and get real low. There's one spot we have to get through, and then after that we've got cover. We make this pretty large loop, like a 300-yard kind of semi-dash being quiet to get to where we're going to cut him off and be about 100 yards from him. And he's about to go out of our lives. He's following this side hill trail up, and it's at the point where it goes up the hill. And right before he does that, I gave him a couple grunts, and he is real interested all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, look, yeah. You know that look, right? Whenever you grunt at a deer and he responds in a good way, he like kind of takes a step.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, yes. So I shut up, and he couldn't take it. He had to come check it out. And so he's just making his way to us. And he stops they do this. When they hear something, they hear a grunt, they don't see the deer, they'll go 20 to 40 yards, and they'll stop and look around some more. So if you're in the situation, be ready for that stop. Like there's these tendencies that deer have. Like when a doe is being weird, she puts her head down, you can tell she's about to jerk her head right back up and see what you're doing, right?
Well, and if you're blind grunting, be patient.
Oh, man, yeah.
Exactly. Don't start moving around 5 minutes later.
Yes, they don't run into grunts very often. Mm-hmm. They kind of like come check it out, right? So he's doing that stuff. We're getting ready, kind of doing some little micro adjustments. I'm getting some ranges. I range some bushes at like 51. And I'm like, okay, if he comes in front of that, I'm shooting him. And we have a big tree that's like divinely placed. Just to go ahead and say it, right? That's like out there at like 40. That gives us a bunch of cover for this deer when he's walking in. It's just a big trunk on like a cottonwood or something. And but I can kind of see him on each side of it every once in a while. And then he like turns in and he comes in front of those bushes. And I'm like, oh, this deer's a giant. I have to try to shoot him. Oh, no. Like it's like the whole day has just came to this apex of a moment, right? And so I'm ready. I'm rip-roaring ready to go. I have an arrow on. Everything's good. Michael is over my shoulder filming. It's awesome. I know the bushes are at 51. I have my pin set for 50, and I'm thinking he's at like a little less than that. So I shoot what I think was, at least, I put my pin kind of right at the bottom of his belly. And actually, he is walking very slow, and I would not advise doing this, but I did it. I retract my previous statement. I didn't put it on the bottom of his belly. I'm thinking about my next shot. This shot, I put it right at the front of his brisket because he's walking very slow. It's super dead calm. I don't want to grunt stop him. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I shoot, and my arrow left and right is perfect, but it's high. I don't know what I did. Probably just excited, messed up, pulled the shot or something. But I shot left. And if I'd have hit 10 inches lower, I'd have smoked him. But I went right over his back, and I was down right away. But that buck he was looking for deer, heard a noise, and wheeled out and ran 10 yards and stopped. And he's like, okay, that deer's somewhere. So he's still in it. So you have to stay in. If you miss a deer, stay in it, because you don't have to go, like it ain't like setting the hook on a fish and missing him because he's gone, right? A deer is still there, with a bow at least. He's behind the tree, but I can see his antler kind of like looking around, like what's going on, right? The antler's not looking, but y'all know what I'm saying. And he gives me the time I need to refocus, get another arrow out of my quiver, and get ready, and he steps back out again, same spot, and gives me a broadside shot, and this time I make it count. He stops, I put my pin at the bottom of his belly, just right where it needs to be, and I absolutely smoke this thing right in, tight on the shoulder, but not in the bone, and I just see the arrow bury up. But I can see it, I didn't get a pass through. I got about half an arrow of penetration. And I'm like, and as soon as it happens, it's smoked. And he wheels out. But a weird thing happens, and I don't see blood. He runs out. I can see the arrow fall out, or what I think's fall out. Ends up being breaks. And he runs out to 150 and just stands there. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is this deer not dying? And then he goes like another 50 yards, slow walking, and stops again. And this is like panic mode all of a sudden. I can't get another shot in this deer. I'm not going to stalk him because it's getting a little bit late, and I'm probably going to bump him if I do anything. So we just decide to just leave. We go make a huge loop out and around to get away to where we're not going to bump the deer. And we're like, all right, he's going to be dead in the morning. The shot is good. We're going to just come find him. So Michael hunts the next morning, and then we don't kill a deer. And we come in midday to go find this deer. And ends up, there's some other hunters there, which I didn't expect to happen, and I kind of felt bad. But I talked to those guys, are real nice dudes from Michigan, Nate and Jacob, and
Jacob,
yeah, they were pretty naked when we showed up. But they were like real cool. They were like, hey, no problem, we're here, we'll help you see if we can find this deer. So we go down to the spot of the shot. I can't find anything. We start just kind of comparing footage to where we think the deer went, and finally we find the arrow, and it's got pretty good blood on it. And we're like, okay, this is encouraging, but there's still not a lot of blood on the ground. And then we kind of we find a couple specks here and there, and then it about near runs out. And what is going on, man? and we like start following trails, and we can't find the deer. We can't find any stuff, and then all of a sudden, he is underneath a tree in the middle of this field, just head up, just doing fine. It's 18 hours later. 18 hours after the shot. I had smoked him absolutely double lung, like no question. And I can't believe it. And my first thought is like, these deer are the toughest things in existence. They are just ridiculously tough. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to have to finish this deer off. And I'm expecting this deer to blow out and run away and just go out of my life, right? Because if he's not dead from that, something's wrong, and he's in good shape. I don't know how good a shape he was. Long story short, I stalk up to 30 yards. I have a favorable wind, and I put 3 more arrows into this deer. All 3 were vital. And I don't know how much of this we're going to show on footage, guys, because some things like this just it's for specific hunting audiences, right? But a lot of people know how this goes. And the deer is still head up. And it's unbelievable. I cannot believe. Now, he's not feeling good, but his head is still up. And I tell Jacob, I was like, hey, man, I don't know what's going on. He's like, do you want one of my arrows? And I was like, sure. So as this transpires, the deer's head starts to bob down. So he was going to die pretty quickly. He was losing some blood, but no reason to let him persist any longer than it already has, right? So I sneak up to about 10 yards because he's not feeling good. And finally, I use one of Jacob's arrows because I'm out. I've used all 5 of my arrows between the day before and that day. And I shoot the deer, and he expires pretty quickly thereafter. But it was just the wildest ride of a deer hunt I've ever experienced. And he's awesome. He's like probably pushing 140, 9-point, with decent tine length. He's really an 8 with an extra inside tine on his left side. He might be mid-130s. I don't know. I'm probably not going to measure him because he's just awesome. I don't really care, you know. But just the boss of the valley, just the deer that you go up there to shoot, big, giant, square body, 4.5-year-old plus. I don't know how old. They're public land deer. We don't know how old they are or whatever, you know, but he's mature. And he was that caramel color, which a lot of the other deer were brown or gray, and he was caramel. I thought it was kind of cool. You know, he had that huge throat patch. It's the deer that we saw the night before rubbing on the trees. So from an evening hunt to a morning hunt to an evening hunt, we were on the same deer the whole time, and it was kind of a cool thing. Mm-hmm. And it made me sad that, I mean, it's terrible that I didn't kill him when I did, but I feel like I did everything right and that I should have. And I'm going to kind of disclose some details about this initial shot. I did gutless method on this deer, so I didn't do an organ check, okay? But we skinned down from the initial entry hole, and the arrow made it all the way through and was poking out the opposite side. And so a pass-through, not a complete pass-through, but a pass-through, right? So it went through the body cavity in a place, it was almost halfway down the body. So for sure in the ribs, not in spine at all.
So when you say almost, you're saying just slightly above the halfway point.
Slightly above the halfway point. So I have no doubt that it was a double lung shot. I didn't get in there and look around. The finishing arrow that I shot of Jacob's was an inch behind that one in the same trajectory, and it killed him within 15 seconds. Or effectively, you know.
So you were we got to go hunt here pretty quick. But
Tyler's been freaking me out. He's looking at the timer like every 5 seconds.
Because we're going over for sure. And we got to hunt this afternoon, man, because I don't have much time. But I wanted you to talk about your arrow setup a little bit because it's different than what you are comfortable shooting at deer. But you also did get a pass-through.
It wasn't really the arrow setup's fault as far as like weight and FOC and stuff goes. I was shooting a LITE arrow, 416 grains. It's my turkey arrow. I messed up my sight on my heavier setup on my elk hunt, and I've been shooting that lighter arrow some, and I shoot it pretty good. And so if you put it in the right place, you think you're going to kill them, and it should have. But I used a broadhead that I have never shot before. I'm not going to say – I just don't want to do that. I don't want to say the name of it, but I'll just tell you all the details of it. It is a rear deploy made of titanium 2-inch cut, and it has a rubber band on it, okay? It's pretty popular, especially in the Western crowd. It's a remake of one of the old broadheads.
Two-blade.
Two-blade, yeah. And so it's got these little things that stick out the side, and it's got a retention screw, so you can use it as a field point too. That should give you enough details. So I shot that deer with that broadhead, and that's where I smoked him. The first one I shot was a Grim Reaper when I missed, and I feel like if I had hit him with that, he was smoked. A couple things happened. The arrow broke off in the body cavity, so it was in there plugging the hole the whole time. And come to find out, I talked to an industry person who kind of is on the inside of this kind of stuff, and the design on that broadhead has changed just slightly to where they were seeking a wider entry hole, but it has had a adverse effect in that the broadhead sometimes closes inside the body cavity. And I have to believe that's what happened to me, because it makes sense. You punch a pencil hole through a lung and then leave the pencil in there, you're not getting a lot out of it. Very, very sad thing to have happen. And I'm not in the business of trashing anybody, but I probably won't use that again. So make sure your setups are tuned, and it's not just about the weight and all that stuff. You make sure you got something on the end of it that you have confidence in, and that's kind of a failure by me. But you got to try. If you're going to try something different, you got to try it sooner or later, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're always trying to build a better mousetrap and figure out how to kill them. But I don't think that the lightness of the arrow, it actually probably helped me as far as unknown ranges on the ground, Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it did not help me to shoot him with practically a field tip. Mm-hmm. So, a long, crazy story with a good ending, with some really low points. I mean, honestly, like, having to shoot that deer that many times and having to be like 10 yards from him when he died was just, it wasn't my favorite thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I enjoyed a lot of that, but the having to finish him off was just absolutely not fun. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that I got him. It was an epic trip, totally worth capitalizing on that cold front. Even if it isn't quite perfect rut dates, like, it's going to be good. The deer are going to be on their feet. They might not be doing the rut thing early, but they're going to be visible, and it's worth doing. Mm-hmm. Guys, we got a lot more podcasts coming. We're about to get out of here, go do some deer hunting, but dadgummit, man, we have got a bunch of things that have happened that we need to talk about. So make sure you're subscribed. If you're not, subscribe on the Element YouTube channel and the Meteor YouTube channel to see a bunch of our hunts coming out soon. Big deer are hitting the ground all over, and that needs to be you as well.
We just had a video actually release on our channel. If you're listening to this, it should have released at least. And it's just me and KC just saying, hey, don't give up on middle of November. People get a little bit wigged out once the 7th goes by, because there's been some hype in the industry the last few years about how good the 7th can be, right? Mm-hmm. And it comes from the heart of deer country. We don't all live there. Most of us don't, actually. So just remember that things are still happening, including yesterday, KC shooting could be the biggest deer of his life on the 16th? 15th. So things are still happening, and I'm telling you, you should not give up on this month. Keep going if you haven't killed a deer. Don't let the Instagram people freak you out.
I was there. It was like, it's the 15th. I'm toast. Mm-hmm. And it's not the truth.
Yep. Keep a positive mental attitude. They call them PMAs. And remember, this is your element.
Liberty.